Hi, I'm Gabe Curtis, the creator of Back to the Future 4. In this video, we'll be discussing the making of the movie, as well as some behind-the-scenes look at what it was like to make this movie. So let's first off start talking about when was the first time that I ever saw the original Back to the Future. Well, that was back on May 14th, 2016. My grandma brought me over the entire series, and that was when I first saw the entire trilogy, and I've loved it ever since. Back before I even started on my journey of making Back to the Future 4, I started my YouTube career back in January of 2017, and ever since, I've just loved to post content. I've loved to post skits and just love to film in general. Then it came to September 23rd, 2018, and I really wanted to film something Back to the Future related. I originally wanted to recreate that scene of when Marty discovers the time machine at Twin Pines Mall, and then, Einstein goes back in time, and then the Libyans come to find them, and then Marty accidentally travels back to 1955. I wanted to recreate that scene, so my dad and I were actually going to our local mall on September 23rd, 2018. It was actually a JCPenney's, and we were going to recreate that scene. It's kind of funny that I didn't get any of this on camera. I was just about to, but I'll tell you what happened. We were there in the parking lot looking for the camera angles. I was strapping my GoPro on the car when a mall cop came behind us and was like, "What are you doing?" And then we explained them, and he was really nice about it, but he just said that we cannot film on their property, and he said maybe another JCPenney will let you do it, but not us. But he was really nice about it. I didn't even get anything on camera, but that would have been pretty funny. So then fast forward a couple weeks, my mom and I actually planned a trip to San Francisco. I actually vlogged the entire trip. Link in the iCard right there if you want to go check that out. The main reason for that trip was actually for filming, and we decided to go to San Francisco and recreate the Full House theme song. And since, they took place in San Francisco, we went to every single place that they filmed at in the Full House theme song for the last season, and I recreated just every single shot. And you can also check that out too in the icon right there. I recreated that. That was October 11th through the 13th is when we were in San Francisco. Once we got back from San Francisco, I wanted to try the whole scene with the Libyans coming and Marty accidentally going back in time. I wanted to try that scene again at like another JCPenney's, but we just didn't get around to it. And I was like, what other Back to the Future content can I make? Then came October 26, 2018, the big days, when I came up with my movie Back to the Future 4. I think it was around like 9, 10, 11 o'clock that night on that 26th when I came up with that. And then from October 27th through the 29th of 2018 is when I wrote the script, came up with the characters, and gathered my equipment. Before I get on to any other dates, I want to really talk about the script changes, because there's been some major script changes. This is my first initial script that I came out with on October 29, 2018. The stuff that I'll talk about is the things that actually changed. So if you remember a particular scene that I'm not talking about, it's because it turned out to be exactly the same once I released it. So when I was in the classroom, Mr. Turner was supposed to just straight up tell me about the time machine. Like, yes, I realized that Parker was obsessed with Back to the Future and loved time travel, but that just didn't make sense how Mr. Turner was just like, you like time travel? Guess what? I have a time machine. So that obviously changed to Mr. Turner giving Parker extra credit because he was struggling in school, and obviously the topic was about like the fourth dimension and about time travel, which led to him accidentally exposing his time machine. Way more realistic than what it originally was. And then towards the end of that scene, it was originally just supposed to be Mr. Turner just gave Parker the coordinates and the location for the time machine. I mean, like, keep in mind, I never even wrote a script for any movie before, so obviously I was just not thinking right, because I had no experience. But that later turned into Mr. Turner just leaving his phone behind, and that's when Parker comes across the location. So I know since we filmed for several months, actually 6.5 months to be exact, I eventually came way better ideas of what the script should be. And then originally the next day, you know, when Parker stays home from school because he's sick, originally it was supposed to be a school shooting and Mr. Turner got shot, and that's why Parker needs to go back in time. But, you know, since of what's been happening in the news the past 2 years, I later just changed that to Mr. Turner getting arrested just because I thought that was a better topic to go off of. And then originally the time machine was supposed to be hidden in a random park, but we just didn't end up doing that. We just ended up, Mr. Turner secretly hid the time machine somewhere on his property. And we just filmed at my mom's friend's house, which has like, what, 100 or 200 acres. So it was perfect. So originally the time circus and flux capacitor was just supposed to be strapped to the back of the dirt bike. Two things there. First of all, when we first tried this, it fell right off. Even if it would have stayed on, it makes no sense. So Parker goes in to the woods to retrieve the time machine, and then he has to strap it on. I mean, it just didn't make sense. In the end, when we came out with this movie, we actually switched it to a backpack, what we refer to as the time pack, with the flux capacitor and time circuits that you just wear on your back. It's perfect. Originally, when Parker accidentally time traveled to 2030, the story just was he forgot that the magic number was 11,000 RPM. In the end, that turned to actually Mr. Turner's phone was the key to time traveling. Whenever that's in range, it connects via Bluetooth to the time pack, so that you can only time travel if you have Mr. Turner's phone with the time pack. And I think that actually ended up pretty good storyline as we went through the movie. So once Parker arrived at 2030 and Billy brought him to his house, which obviously was not his anymore because it was 11 years later, he came across this old lady, Rachel. And originally, in the script, I casted one of my cats in the movie. So originally, Rachel was supposed to be like holding Parker's cat that he originally had back in 2019. So what happened there was every single time we tried to get my cat in the scene, she would not cooperate. So we just ended up scrapping that. So that's why that didn't work. So originally Parker was just supposed to walk his dirt bike a couple blocks down to his current grandma's house. But he just ended up leaving the bike at the house. I think we just ended up doing that just because of time's sake. Once Parker got to his current grandma's house, the original storyline was everybody switched to electric. And he just happened to have a gas-powered lawnmower. But I think the same thing happened where we either it was time's sake or we just forgot about it. I'm not sure. Putting the script as Parker's grandma had extra gas from her car. This was what we ended up having. And originally, as I said, Mr. Turner was going to get shot, so when I went back in time, I was going to give him a bulletproof vest. Isn't this really starting to sound like the original Back to the Future? That's one of the things that I did not want to happen. I wanted this to be more original movie, not like the original Back to the Future. So we changed that bulletproof vest into me intervening with one of Mr. Turner's students, James, in the movie. The reason why Mr. Turner got arrested because James was recording Parker and Mr. Turner's conversation when they were talking about time travel, and he had an illegal energy source, and that's why he got arrested. So in the original script, towards the end of the movie, we were just originally going to just burn the flux capacitor. And the reason why we didn't do that is because we were thinking there might be a possibility for a sequel, and that is happening. If you don't know, I'm actually filming a sequel, Back to the Future 5. I actually released the trailer a couple weeks ago, so the link is in the iCard right there if you want to go check that out. It's actually coming out on January 10th, 2020, and has way better graphics and quality and overall better script, so I hope you're excited for that. So I'm glad we did not burn the flux, so we had the sequel. But then originally, Mr. Turner was going to drive Parker back to that park where he hid the flux capacitor. Because remember, in this original script, he got shot, and he hid the time machine at a random park. And obviously, a time machine isn't a teleport machine. You can go back and forth through time, but you can't teleport anywhere. So if Parker was going to time travel near his house, that wouldn't work because his past self and grandma was already going to the park. So it would just not make sense for Parker just to, be here. And then his grandma's like, how did you get here? So the original script was Mr. Turner got the dirt bike and put it in the back of the car and drove Parker back to that park. So then Parker would see his older self time travel, and then since he has a dirt bike, he would just go back down to the path where his grandma was, and it was like nothing happened. But obviously, since we scrapped that idea, because, first of all, we just turned the park into Mr. Turner's property, and since he didn't get shot, we just added another time travel sequence of him time traveling near his house, and time travels back to present, so there's no paradox. And originally, the very ending scene, which was kind of boring, was Parker and his grandma was just going to have an after-school snack. We changed that to Parker sneaking in and sat down on the couch next to his grandma, because you remember she was asleep originally before the breaking news came on, but now since the breaking news won't came on, she would still be asleep, so Parker just snuck in, and then we added that little joke at the end where his grandma is like, let's watch Back to the Future. And Parker's like, no, not this again. But yeah, that's all the script changes. So after I drafted the original script on October 29th, 2018, as you see, that went through a lot of changes. But that exact day, we actually started filming. And we actually still have a few scenes from that first day of filming in the movie. It was at the beginning of the movie when I first woke up, when I was getting ready for school, when I went to bed. Then comes November 3rd when I actually bought the time circuits off of Etsy. It was just a plastic box with paper labels, but they actually had a backlight in it, so light it up, which was cool. Then personalized my original dates, and then from that day, I planned the first ever release date of Back to the Future 4 on November 26, 2018, which is crazy because if you know when it came out on May 10th, 2019. And this will explain why I changed it so much. So November 7th, I received the time circuits at my house. And then I was just trying to think, how can I film that classroom scene? I was thinking, like, I don't want to be in front of a green screen. I mean, like, I want to look realistic. So, like, my dad was like, oh, one of my rooms, he worked at a hospital. So one of his rooms in the hospital, maybe like in a teaching kitchen, kind of looked like a classroom. Not really, but I mean, it looked more like an office room. And we were just trying to figure that out. But we were still trying to figure like, I don't know what to do. Then comes November 10th, we actually built the original flux capacitor. I wish I would have gotten behind the scenes look like a time lapse of my dad and I building the flux capacitor, but I didn't. But I'll show you a picture of what it looked like on the back of my dirt bike. But basically, we followed this DIY video off of YouTube. I'll actually link it in the iCard right there. I believe the guy's name was Dustin. He was actually very helpful of us building our first ever flux capacitor. It was just out of a cardboard box. You cut holes in it. I mean, you tape, spark plug wires. You can watch this video to learn a lot more about it, but if you watch this video, that's basically how we did it. So it comes November 19th, 2018 when I figured out, oh my gosh, I should film the classroom scene at my school. I emailed one of my teachers, Ms. Hanthorne, and at the time I was in 8th grade. She was my 7th grade science teacher the year before. So I decided to ask her if we could film in her classroom. The next day on the 20th of November, she said yes. But by this point, it was already Thanksgiving break, so that's when I was like, great, so I can't have it released on November 26th. So then I planned the second release date for Back to the Future 4 on December 10th, 2018. My dad and my uncle came up with the idea of the backpack with the time circuits and flux capacitor in the backpack. Time pack is when they actually came up with that over Thanksgiving break of 2018. That comes for our second day ever of filming Back to the Future 4 on November 25th. is when I filmed with my Uncle Ken. He played Billy in the movie. Again, we filmed on November 25th when in the storyline it was supposed to be April. Obviously, that doesn't look realistic. And obviously, since it's almost Christmas, it got too dark so fast, so we ran out of time to finish. So the next weekend on December 2nd, we refilmed that, but then my phone died. But it was still okay. We switched to my GoPro. We still got the entire scene done. It just wasn't the best quality because the GoPro isn't the best in terms of audio quality, and we didn't have mics at the time, so it wasn't the best. So I was like, I guess it's fine. I mean, I would rather refilm it, but I was like, okay, we only have 8 days for the release, and I was like, I'm just gonna keep it there. Then comes December 5th, actually the day after my birthday, when I filmed with my grandma. And even though the script originally said that I went down a couple blocks to her house, at that point, we didn't have any other house to film at, so we just decided to film at a trailer park. And like, why would you film a trailer park? Well, it's actually because we had our travel trailer parked there just for storage because we didn't have any place to put it. We originally had it in our driveway, but you're not supposed to have it in your driveway. It was blocking the sidewalk, so we just had to store it somewhere. So it was like, oh, I have the keys. We might as well film there and just have my grandma living in a trailer park in 2030. But again, since it's so close to Christmas, so close to winter, obviously the sun goes down so early, and that day at school. So I didn't get out of school till 3:45, and I believe we didn't get on site until like, what, 4:15 or something like that? So obviously it gets so dark, and I was like, oh, whatever. It's getting dark, but let's still try to do this. So for my first ever time I tried filming that scene, I pressed record on my phone. And when I was running, like, oh my gosh, what trailer is my grandma in? The flux capacitor came right out of my backpack and fell on the ground and broke. So that was nice. I'm like, great. So I'm like, I don't know how we're gonna film this. But I was still hoping we could still have it out on the December 10th. But the next day on December 6th, I was actually originally gonna be filming in the classroom. That classroom scene with my dad. He was stuck at work and he was too busy, and then I had a migraine, of course, because if you're one of my friends, you know I get migraines all the time and they suck. So at that point I'm like, okay, December 10th, it's not coming out that day. So I didn't even put out another date. I literally put the entire movie on hold for a month. I didn't put any news out for a month. So over Christmas break, we actually fixed the flux capacitor, which was nice, and we actually redesigned it. So instead of using that plastic time circuit with the paper labels from Etsy, I decided to use, I think it was like $1 on my Kindle. I got off the App Store on my Kindle. It was touchscreen, so you can literally type in the dates, and it was perfect. It had sound effects. It looked so realistic. So I'm like, I don't even use my Kindle anymore. I was like, why don't we just put the Kindle inside the time pack, replace it with the old time circuits, and it's so much easier. So eventually comes January 10, 2019, and we got permission that day to film in my former teacher's classroom. And at that point, we were also trying to figure out, well, it doesn't make sense just for my dad and I just to be in a class. I got a couple of my friends, Gerardo and Matthew, and we just filmed from there. And we were like, wait, you only have 2 other students? That doesn't make sense. So then we just changed the script to being like, the rest of the students were on a field trip for like choir or band or something like that. Because that actually happens a lot in my school. So there's just a few students left over. So we finished everything but one scene. I remember, I'm like, so like Gerardo left, Matthew left, and I'm like, yay, we finished it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I remembered we had one more scene. I mean, we finished the whole, like, main scene, but I had one more scene to film with Matthew because I go back in time to intervene with him, distract him so he doesn't contact the police and get Mr. Turner arrested. I'm like, oh, seriously? Forgot to film that? So I'm like, well, at least we got everything else done. So I just decided, oh, we'll get that done at some point. Then comes January 14th, when I announced my 3rd announcement of changing the release date for Back to the Future 4. I'm like, And like at this point, I mean, like I already changed the date a couple times. Like my track record hasn't been good, but I was like, oh, it's gonna come out on January 31st. Believe me, it will. If you watch my movie, you remember when I was biking to school and had those outside shots? Well, I filmed that on January 19th, and it was really funny. It was actually when I was in the middle of filming that, random people came up to my phone when I was on a tripod, and they were like, what is going on? They're like, why is there a phone here? And I was like, they probably had to go to the bathroom or something. Oh yeah, sure. A person just leaves their phone video recording on a tripod to go to the bathroom. That doesn't make sense. Anyway, I was like a good 100 feet away from them, so I didn't even know what was happening. I was coming on the bridge. There was a lot of gravel and then pavement, and it was like on this incline. It was so hard to get up that, to go on the bridge to get to school. In the movie actual path, it was paved all the way, but obviously movie magic, I made it so I had to go over the gravel for privacy reasons, so people wouldn't know exactly where I was filming. But it was just funny, I just happened to choose that. I fell so many times trying to get up that, so that was like the last time I was trying to get up that, and I was like, oh, so then I like fell. There wasn't much room in that gravel trail because, you know, it's not a public trail. It was like this, like small. So it was so hard for me I couldn't turn around. So I had to go all the way to the end of the trail and then come back. And that's when those people came up. I also included that clip in my blooper reel. So for Back to the Future 4, so you can click the link in the icon right there to watch all the bloopers that happen. Then comes the next day on January 20th when I filmed at my mom's friend's house, you know, in the movie Mr. Turner's Property. I filmed with my grandma, and we got her entire part done, but when I was trying to get my part done, you know, when I find the time machine and then travel back in time, of course, something bad has to go wrong. The gasoline tank started leaking in the dirt bike, so then we couldn't film my part, but at least we got my grandma's part done. Again, that was the 20th, and I scheduled to release it on the 31st, so I'm like, okay, hopefully I can film that next weekend, you know, so that I can easily get it out in time. And I was like, I'm just hoping I can do that. But then it turned out, like, from an earlier problem, originally, again, when my friend Matthew didn't have time to finish that scene, he didn't have time to film between we were filming and by the time it was scheduled to come out. I'm like, okay, January 31st isn't happening. I rescheduled the release date for late February. There wasn't any news for about a month because I actually got a lot of migraines again, which sucked. So it wasn't until February 20th until I fixed the flux capacitor. And obviously that was already late February. I mean, the only thing we've done so far is to fix the flux capacitor. We haven't even started filming yet because we didn't have time. So then from there, I planned on releasing Back to the Future 4 in late March. But guess what happened again? I had more migraines. I missed even more of school. And then comes March 18th. That's literally almost late March again. And I wanted to film sometime that week in the classroom with my dad, but again, he was too busy. We couldn't do it the next week. That was spring break and nobody was at school. So then a couple days later on March 20th, I rescheduled Back to the Future 4 until early April of 2019. So as you can see, there's just always something going on we have to reschedule. But that's what life's like. I mean, it doesn't always go perfect. Especially when you're filming a movie and you originally had the release date about a month from when you first started filming. Obviously, things are going to go wrong. But over spring break, we actually accomplished a lot. I actually finished filming at my mom's friend's house, you know, in the movie Mr. Turner's Property. The dirt bike was working again. Successfully filmed me finding the time pack and travel back time. And we were like, yes, we finally did that. But guess what happened? The flux broke again, but luckily not when I was filming. It was pouring down rain, and since it was made out of cardboard, it destroyed pretty quickly. But luckily, it was fine when we were filming. Once we turned off the camera, then it broke. Another thing we did over spring break was we filmed with my grandma. Remember that scene when Parker finds out that his teacher got arrested? And a couple days later, I filmed at my friend's house when Parker tells his grandma that he traveled back in time, and he has to get back in time. What is he gonna do? That's in 2030. That's when we filmed that over spring break. But luckily, all those scenes I did not need my flux capacitor for. So even though it was broke, we didn't need it for any of that, which was good. But then comes early April, where okay, we're ready to film scenes with my flux capacitor, but nope. My dad was sadly too busy to film or fix the flux capacitor because he had a lot of stuff going on in his work. And my friend Matthew he still didn't have time to film in the classroom. So from that point on, I was like, I know we're gonna get it done eventually. Then I actually planned the trailer releasing on April 19th, along with the actual release date for the movie. I was like, okay, that's a couple weeks from now. That should give us time to fix the flux capacitor, start filming scenes, and then by the time April 19th comes around, that would give us an idea on when we can actually release it. So I was like, okay, that should be fine. Comes April 19th, surprisingly, it actually released that day, and that came out May 3rd is going to be the official release date. It was pretty good. I mean, we were on schedule for all that to happen. You remember when I said back on December 2nd, I filmed with my Uncle Ken, and it was successful. It wasn't great quality because of the GoPro. And again, we filmed that in December when it's supposed to be April. So it was like, okay. And we were like, okay, we might as well refilm it if we have time. And it was actually kind of funny. It turns out the day I went back in time, April 28th, 2030, we actually filmed that on April 28th, 2019. So conditions were great. So we refilmed with my Uncle Ken that day. And that made it so, okay, the weather looks great. It actually looks like spring. We fixed the flux capacitor. And the quality was good because my phone wasn't dead. So he wasn't forced to use a GoPro. So at this point I was like, okay, everything's looking great. I only have a couple more scenes to film. We can definitely have it out on May 3rd. Next day on April 29th, I had a migraine and stayed home from school that day. And I was really worried we couldn't have it out on that Friday. But I was just praying that my migraine would go away and I could quickly film the rest of the scenes to have it on May 3rd. But the next day on April 30th, kind of the same routine happened. I planned to film that afternoon with my friend Matthew and my dad, but they both had work to do that afternoon. So I was like, okay, great. I'm like, at that point I was like, I don't know if we can get it out, but I was like, there was a slim chance we could still have it out on May 3rd. I'm like, this is only a few days out. I'm like, okay, maybe we can. But the next day on May 1st, this is when things really started to go downhill. So I went to school, didn't have a migraine, felt great. But then when I went into my third period class, which was science, my friend Matthew was in that class and he gave me the bad news. And he said his mom wouldn't let him be in the movie. And I was like, oh no. Oh, this is not good. Like, okay, I respect that. And obviously I wasn't mad at him. I wasn't mad at anybody, but it was just kind of unfortunate that happened. God, that means we have to recast and refilm the entire scene with different people. I was like, maybe I can get people on short notice, do it tomorrow, have it out the next day on that Friday. But then guess what? I got home from school. I was planning to film another scene right outside of my house, you know, when I go back in time for the last time. But I got another migraine. I went to bed like at what? Probably like 4:30 in the afternoon when I got home from school. And then I didn't wake up till like 8:30. And then once I woke up, I was like, I feel better now, but I just wasted all that time. So at this point, I was like, okay, May 3rd's in 2 days. There's no way that we can do this. So I was like, okay, it's not releasing on May 3rd. Right after that happened, I'm like, so I actually deleted my original trailer that said May 3rd because I'm like, okay, can't do that. But then actually comes the day of May 3rd, and I re-released my trailer. It's the exact same thing, only has a different date. It was actually for exactly a week later on May 10th. And I announced it on everything. And that was the final change in the release date, because you obviously know it did come out on May 10th, 2019. Over that weekend, I filmed with my mom as Rachel Yun, the old lady that I come across in 2030, and that same day we also filmed her as a news reporter, Jane Friday. So that went well. And then once I got back to school, and luckily I was feeling good, on May 7th, I recasted Matthew, and it actually turned out better this way because we got a lot more people. Originally it was just me, my friend Matthew, and Gerardo. Now it was me, my friend Gerardo, Shayla, Natalie, Pablo, Sean, Aaron, and Preston. So we had way more people, and I was like, okay, it just turned out for the best. We actually finished the scene that day, and we literally finished it in half an hour, and we're like, wow, this is great. Then the next day on May 8th, I finished up my final scene with my grandma. And then a day later, on May 9th, which was the day before my release date, my dad and I finished up the final scene in the classroom. We didn't need any students for that because that was just when Parker went back in time and talked to Mr. Turner about like what happened. So we finished that right before the sunset. We came home. First, I charged my equipment back up. I gathered my script and material and went outside. And it was about 10 o'clock, I believe, when we were filming the final scene that we had to film for Back to the Future. Was that scene right outside my house in the cul-de-sac where Parker goes back in time for the final time. We literally finished filming less than 24 hours before it's going to come out, but I pulled it off. Then I stayed up late that morning, edited everything, and I believe I pressed the upload button right around 3 a.m. I went to sleep, didn't get much sleep. I was like, it doesn't matter at this point. I need to have this out. Then I woke up, I think it was around 7 a.m. if I'm not wrong. I woke up, and it took a while, but it was all uploaded to YouTube. And I was like, finally, I got that done. So then I went to school. Everybody was so hyped up for it. Then it came out at 5 in the afternoon on May 10th. So that's everything. The entire making of Back to the Future 4. The problems we had, the script changes, and the reason why the original release date for Back to the Future 4 was November 26, 2018, and didn't end up coming out till the next year on May 10th. I hope you like this little behind the scenes and in this documentary of me making Back to the Future 4. But I couldn't have done that without my mom, my dad, and my grandma, which were huge supporters on this. They helped me write the script, they helped me film, and they obviously were all in it as actors and actresses. So give props to them for helping me through everything. And obviously, even my friends that were in it, thank you for being in that. And if somebody's watching this that I filmed at your house, thank you for letting me do that. Like Jenny, thank you for letting me film at your house. Debbie, thank you for letting me film at your house. And yeah, that's basically it. Be sure to leave a like, hit that subscribe button, and see you guys in the next one. Peace out.
The lead, please.